I was supposed to have said good morning, but it's good afternoon now. So you're running a little late. The story for the next 15-20 minutes, and I'll try to keep it short and sharp because we are already, as I said, running late, is I just thought I'd set the context in terms of why we are talking about innovation and some imperatives for industry. And I come from a company that's called Tata Chemicals. And if you work for a company whose middle name is Chemicals, you have a certain sensitivity that ends up developing in your system. And from the imperatives, I lead on to some of the solution themes that we need to keep in mind when we work in these areas. And I've tried to be conscious about not bringing in examples from our specific company, but really keep the theme as generic as possible, because I think this is an industry-wide challenge. And the perspective that I'm taking in this talk is really about Indian industry. Particularly, I have chemical industry in mind, but the context is Indian industry rather than anything else. So the quick key message for those of you who want a quick nap before lunch is that Indian industry needs to embrace innovation for growth and what I call inclusive prosperity. Because I think the second phrase in terms of inclusive prosperity is something very critical to the survival of enterprises that are existing for profit. And if we don't have this, the manifestation of this will take a variety of shapes in different parts of the country. And we are already getting a sense of that, particularly with companies which work in the natural resources space. And hence, this is really the short key message. I mean, if I had to do this presentation on Twitter, this is what you'd get. I think it meets your 117 letter criteria or whatever. We start with the customer because it's always a good idea. And, in India, we are told that treat your customer like God. And I think that's a bit of a problem. Because if you go to a temple and you give what is called Naivedya, you can give to God whatever you like, whenever you like, in any shape or form you like. And typically in India, customers have been treated like that. They've been given whatever the supplier wants in whichever amount, in whichever quality. So maybe if you treat your customer like a king, it's better for the customer than to be treated like God, at least in the Indian context. But notwithstanding, the key driver for all of this, the key attraction for for-profit organizations is that Indians born today will consume significantly more than 2 generations ago. And this is irrespective of what happens in Delhi and all the various capitals of the world. This is by and large. And this is what is going to drive tremendous growth in terms of demand for goods and services, which in turn will require innovation and knowledge intensities to be increased significantly because the numbers are much, much higher. In terms of, and this is the chemical industry construct coming in, the first imperative for us in terms of Indian industry is that we have to change our economic thinking fundamentally. In the earlier days, economy was seen as a larger piece within which there was a small ecosystem or ecology element in it. I think the fundamental shift that has happened, and you see the impact of this everywhere, is you need to think of the economy sitting embedded within the ecosystem. And this is one of the first drivers for why we need knowledge and innovation. Because we are not resource rich or as resource rich as we think we are, especially if you need to bring that inclusive prosperity for everyone. If you change the denominator significantly, then suddenly something that is abundant becomes scarce. And I think this is the construct we need to have. So the entire ecosystem of industry and others needs to think of themselves within the ecological landscape in this manner. The second imperative, and I'm sorry, pre-lunch, this is a bit of a heavy slide, is typically in every organization, particularly for-profit organizations, and I'm talking about industry in general, you typically have competing values. So there is an element in the organization that tries to create, that tries to break free, that tries to do new things. And this is this arrow. Because the opposite of that is control. You have cost controls, you have quality controls, you have Six Sigma projects. All of them are to bring controls, are to bring certain certainty in the way you operate. But the forces that fight that are the innovation bits, the growth, breakout thinking, all those things. So there is always a creative tension which you need to balance. The second element, axis, is the collaborate and compete axis. Because while we talk about people issues and we say we must work together as a team, at the end of the day, shareholder value creation, speed, choices is about competing. And one of the big challenges we have in the Indian industry is a child in India has grown up competing from the time he or she was 3 or 4. You compete to get into your school, you compete to get into your class, you compete for results. So suddenly 25 years later, you're told, no, you now need to collaborate. And it's a very alien concept that comes in. And collaboration and competition, again, is a creative force that needs to be balanced. So if you need to work on the create side, you need to let go of the control side a little bit. But you need to be aware that any organization can't excessively move towards any of these axes. You need to have a balance. And where you peg your balance depends on where you are and what you want to do. The third imperative is communication. And we are typically in industry very indisciplined about communication. And if you find people who work in the political system, their discipline on communication is very important because you need to follow a 4-step process. Whether it is getting a buy-in from your boss or whether it is getting consensus with your team, the step 1 is awareness. I think you need anybody who even has a wonderful idea needs to first socialize that idea with a bunch of people or with the stakeholders that he or she has in mind. And that's what I call awareness, so that you're bringing people aware, making them aware about whatever hypothesis that you have. The second is alignment. And we need to devote time and effort for getting the alignment necessary with all the people who work with you. And those of you who are from the electrical engineering segment, the Honorable Minister has just left, you have the concept of inductance, resistance, and capacitance. And you can map the human network also along these three. You'll find people who have a higher resistance component, others who have a high capacitance component, and some who have a high inductance components. So when you design your human system, you might want to put the right people in the right slots. But the alignment effort has to be necessarily there. The third is engagement, which is when you really get the buy-in, interact with people, and build the necessary network for you to be successful. And then the fourth one is action. And if you reflect on the organizations where you work or if you run your own businesses, if you try and bypass one of this because your idea you thought was so super or you thought it wasn't necessary, you'll find later at some point you're getting into a mess. Typically, alignment and engagement is what we miss out on. We think we have made people aware, now we can get into action. You can't bypass any of these steps. I've put a slightly tongue-in-cheek respectability pecking order where food, pharma is high up there. You know, it's very respectable to work in the food space. If you're R&D head for Nestle, it's very nice. Pharma, auto, banking. Chemicals I've put last. Because generally, if you say you're from the chemical industry, the immediate mental image is smokestack, some garbar going on. Whereas you don't have that sense. If you're thinking of an auto industry, you think good cars, mobility, all positive emotions. So this communication becomes particularly important for people like me who belong to the bottom of the respectability heap. The third is rewards must be shared. And I think this is very, very important, particularly for our nation. And if we ignore this, things will just not move. You're seeing the impact of this in the natural resource industries in the east and in the north. We have tremendous natural resources, but it's just not going to move till we have this component built into our innovation and knowledge strategies. And that is why these 4 imperatives are absolutely critical in terms of where you go ahead. So let me talk about solutions, because I'm also an engineer and it has been drilled into me from sort of the time I was in my mother's womb that you don't come with a problem without a solution. So I'm coming with some solutions now. The first is we need to accept and overcome some of our shortcomings in terms of the analytics. What I've tried to show you here is the calculated default rate depending on the ratings that people have got from very high-end banking community. And on the right side is the actual default rates. And this just shows you that we sometimes should not have excessive faith in our own analytics. And I think when you start with that humility platform, things begin to improve. And these are, if you look at even AAA, the calculated default rate for a AAA company was this, actual was 0.1. And so the point here is, maybe there is something to correct in what we mark as a AAA. And this is the same thing in the education system. In a school, if a kid is called a non-performer, be damn sure when he's 40 years old, he's going to be sponsoring the convention center for his university. The second is developing effective collaboration. Collaboration, by the way, is considered a nice word. It's defined as the action of working with someone to produce something. Very nice, very sweet, and actually you need all of this. But collaboration also has a flip side. This is also collaboration. And so if we want to bring this theme into the way we work, and I think we need to be sensitive that both these bullets lead you to collaboration. So you need to do that, again, communication exercise to make sure that people are interpreting it as the first bullet, unless you deliberately want them to interpret it as the second bullet. Second solution theme, this is just an example from our company. We make soda ash, we make salt, and we make fertilizer. And these are the companies we collaborate with. So you'd be wondering, what are we doing with Wildlife Trust of India? I mean, we are not anything in wildlife at all, except, we get salt from the sea. We work with Bombay Natural History Society. We work with UNICEF. We work with CAPART. The whole idea is you need to extend the sense of collaboration if you want to do innovation and knowledge-based enterprises, because you need that full network with each one bringing certain capabilities to the table. And this, again, has to be systematically brought into an enterprise. It won't happen on autopilot. Nothing ever happens on autopilot. Those of you who studied thermodynamics know that. So this is a very specific solution you need to have. The third is, how does an enterprise create value? And fundamentally, I have simplified things. You create value in three ways, and what I'm calling production-based excellence, which is all the upstream natural resource, oil and gas, mining. What they do is they have very large manufacturing or mining operations, and you maximize uptime, yield, and throughput. And you mine the hell out of the place, or you dig for oil, or whatever you do. This is really production-based excellence in some form or the other. The second is what I'm calling consumer-based excellence, where you have branding and brand strategy that drives things. But the core of a Unilever, the core of a P&G is reach. They have phenomenal branding capability, and they have phenomenal distributorship capabilities. They can have all the Kirana stores and the panwalas with their product, with an MIS that tells them real time how many sachets of whatever X shampoo is available with which guy. And I think that's the core competence that they have built around consumer-based. And the third one, which is where innovation will play a very big role, is what we are calling knowledge-based excellence, where you have customized products and services for which you need a very unique understanding of the customer's need. Those of you who are fussy eaters, and I'm sure many of you are, if you go to a restaurant and 4 people sit and they order some chapati, one will say, I want it very hot and fluffy, another will say, I want ghee, one will be without ghee. Same for dosas, if you order that kind of stuff. And that's like a specialty business. Each one's requirement is slightly different. One wants in crisp, one wants not so crisp, with onion, without onion. This is all customization. And similarly in the products, when you have this kind of knowledge, that's the kind of relationship you need to have with your customer, to have a nuanced understanding of what is it that the customer requires, and create and tailor your products towards that. The paint industry is getting to it. If you buy things from some of the big paint guys, you do a virtual painting of your home. You don't have it earlier times. Nowadays you have, in terms of foods, you have variety of yogurts. In the old days, there were 2 varieties if you went to your shop. Yesterday's yogurt and today's yogurt. You can choose what you like. But now you have this flavor, that flavor, peach, melba, ice, mango, all kinds. And that's really what this is about. And again, it has very high value, because if you're able to understand that specific button of your customer, he or she will pay you top dollar to get that. The fourth solution, and what I call the espoused experience gap, and typically you'll find, those of us who are from industry, we tend to make a lot of noise and say government is not helping, and generally everybody likes to run down the government. It's a very popular pastime. But in India, what has happened is actually government is doing its job on R&D. And it's the private sector, for-profit lot, who are not doing their job. This is really a sense of what is the percentage of R&D spend being done by government versus the private sector. And you'll find in all the other countries, which we are very happy to always quote, China and US and all of that, the green bit, which is what is of relevance, is what the business R&D spending it is, and it's very, very poor. And I think one of my esteemed colleagues earlier referred to it. We need to fix this. And this is something where you have to turn the spotlight on ourselves and say, why aren't we just doing enough? If you see the recent agenda of government in R&D, they want to get to 1% of GDP with equal contribution from both sides. So here the government is frankly in India done far more than what the private sector has done. And we have defaulted on our responsibility. Because at the end of the day, you can talk about all things. You need a certain amount of funding to make things happen. Otherwise, you can keep debating the point, it's not relevant. This is very, very small, India private sector's contribution to research. And I think this needs to be brought up in some manner or form. I'm part of a CII setup. So that mafia is busy working on how to get this to happen. I hope they're successful and we are going to work towards it. The fifth solution is really a technically elegant and scientific solution. It's really about what we define as waste. And I'll give you a few examples to make my point. When radium got discovered, the big product that people wanted was radium. And because it was used for glow-in-the-dark clocks, aircraft dials, and so on. That time, uranium was thought of as a waste because you need 3 tons of uranium to extract 1 gram of radium. And so you thought uranium is a waste, throw it out. So it's a matter of what you understand is waste and the definition of how you use every molecule that comes out from nature. The second, if you look at iron, there's metallurgists here, I'm sure. There's a huge amount that we call gangue and we throw it. But if you know how to use the molecules that are coming out, know how to separate them at a cost-effective manner, all the tailings of all the ferrous and non-ferrous industry is your raw material stack, and suddenly that changes the picture. Third example, we are in agriculture. Apart from just the pulses, the oil seed or the sugarcane, the food part, the rest of it is burnt as fuel. And frankly, from a chemistry and a chemical engineering perspective, it's the most unelegant way of doing things. There's a whole bunch of valuable chemicals there. So what can we do to extract those rather than just burn them as fuel? Then you might as well wait a few billion years, let it become coal and then burn it. At least from an oxidation state, you are in better shape. But just don't take this is the sugarcane bit and the rest, all of the plant is just fuel. You're just burning it. Bad science. That's what it is. Fertilizer, we put in urea stack loads. India imports some 7-8 million tons of urea. It's there in the news in some manner or form every day. But you'll find that very little of it gets used in the soil. The phosphorus, for example, has a 15%. This is the model being followed in the farm because we just don't know how to make sure that the absorption levels into the plant is higher. This is a gross waste, and this needs knowledge, this needs innovation to fix. And then if you can do your own maths in terms of how much material do you really need. Nitrogen straight comes down to 1/3. Phosphates come down by 1/10. It's massive impact. And the end game. So what happens if a company does all of this? And every company unfortunately has a CFO. And they want their IRRs to be very nice. And this will help the CFO and the CEO and their colleagues remember this, because you have innovation, you have reputation, and you have resources. And you're optimizing all of this to get a maximum IRR. And that's a phrase even your CFO will be able to remember, because anyway his booth is IRR only. So any project you come, he'll say, what is the IRR? It's not good enough, not meeting my hurdle. So you tell him, if you're getting your innovation, reputation, and resources. And reputation is very important. Again, I come from a chemical industry bias, so we have extra worries about reputation. But for anyone actually nowadays, in any industry, in any part of the world, reputation is increasingly an important parameter. And so if you have these 3 IRRs sorted out, I think the Indian enterprise will be in a very good shape. I have one last slide, which is this. And in many of the meetings, we go in Bombay and we go to Delhi. There is a very honorable group of people who constitute themselves and call themselves the Planning Commission. And you might be familiar with them. But as long as you have a Planning Commission, you will need to wait for a Doing Commission. Until a Doing Commission is formed, the best place to look for a helping hand is at the end of your arm. Thank you very much.